everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In today's video, we are previewing the Week 11 matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There is a lot to talk about in this matchup, so let's not waste any time and let's jump right in. In this Sunday's matchup, we have the 6-3 San Francisco 49ers hosting the 4-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before we get into this game, let's rewind the clocks about 11 months ago. Brock Purdy's first start in the NFL up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers led by Tom Brady. The 49ers went on to absolutely dominate that game, the final score of 35-7. But things are a little bit different this year between the two teams. If we look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week against the Tennessee Titans, they were able to win comfortably 20-6. However, prior to that, they had lost 4 games in a row. Somewhat similarly, the 49ers had lost 3 games in a row, and then we were able to just dominate and destroy the Jacksonville Jaguars 34-3. So this is a game where both teams coming off a big win, ending their losing streaks. Vegas sees this as a big favorable matchup for the San Francisco 49ers. We're favored by 11.5 points. The over-under for the game is 41.5 points. So there, Vegas is kind of thinking this will be like a 26-15-ish type game in favor of the San Francisco 49ers, and I tend to agree the 49ers should be favorites in this game. However, you can never overlook any team in the NFL. I think if any team has learned that lesson, it's the 49ers against the Browns, against the Vikings, and even somewhat against the Bengals. Now, looking at this matchup too, luckily, which I think is awesome, is that there's actually no major injuries for either team. Looks like Aaron Banks is probably going to sit this game out. Hopefully he can be back for the Week 12 matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. But both teams relatively healthy, and that's always a great thing to see. Two teams pretty much at their best heading into a matchup. Now for this game, what I want to talk about, guys, is what the 49ers offense needs to do to be successful, and then what the 49ers defense needs to do to also be successful and get the win against the Buccaneers. When I look at this matchup from the 49ers offensive perspective, I want to see the 49ers basically turn this and game plan around Deebo Samuel for this game. We saw him come back last week from injury against the Jacksonville Jaguars, had a solid game, a few catches, had that really nice rushing touchdown, but I think this needs to be a trademark Deebo Samuel type game. We need to get him involved early and often. We know that we love the quick pass out to Deebo, which is essentially like a wide receiver screen. I want to see him involved in end arounds. I want to see him out of the backfield, running out of the backfield. I want to see him, let's throw the ball to Deebo Samuel down the field. He's able to do a great job of catching the ball in traffic. The Buccaneers have some really, really good defenders in the defensive backfield. They have some good linebackers. Deebo Samuel is able to make those catches, break tackles, and then take it to the house. But this should be a trademark vintage 2021 like Deebo Samuel game. Now, I'm not saying don't target Ayuk. Of course, Ayuk should get his targets. George Kittle should get his targets. McCaffrey and anyone else we get involved in the offense. But I'd like to see this be a Deebo game, maybe like 100-ish receiving yards, maybe 50 or 60 rushing yards, maybe 2 touchdowns. That would be awesome to really establish Deebo back in this offense. And then that gives teams like Seattle and Philadelphia coming up on the schedule a lot to think about, because they're already worried about Ayuk, they're worried about Kittle, they're worried about McCaffrey. If you throw in a Deebo Samuel who's playing like that 2021 level, then forget about it. It's going to be just so difficult to stop the 49ers. Now, the other things I'm thinking about with regards to the 49ers offense is the run game. And I think something that we're going to have to be successful at are those outside zone runs, those quick pitches to the side, because running up the middle is not going to be easy against this team, because there is a guy by the name of Vita Vea in the middle of that Buccaneers defense, and to me, he is one of the best, most underrated defenders in the entire NFL. He is so good, he can wreck games. Not only that, he's actually their leading sacker too, with 4.5 sacks. They have some good linebackers behind him too, in Devin White, Levante David. So running up the middle, we will have to do it to keep the defense honest, but it's not going to be easy. So if we can have that success to the outside, wear Vita Vea out, so he's going to have to be running sideline to sideline, which is definitely not his forte. But I think if we can have success doing that, that should go a long way. And having Trent Williams back too is going to be awesome. He did such a great job against the Jaguars last week. The other thing when it comes to the running game, and this will be the third and last point about the 49ers offense, is going to be I want to see more Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason. I feel like I'm saying this every week, but I think this week more than any other week, it's going to be really important. Why? Because in 4 days' time, after the game, we're going to be going up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. It's on a very short week, Thursday night Thanksgiving game, and we need to have Christian McCaffrey as healthy and ready to go as possible for that game. I think McCaffrey probably gets 10 to 12 carries in the Buccaneer game. I'd like to see him maybe get 3 or 4 catches, but the rest of it should be heavy doses of Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason. Those guys, Mitchell has some solid speed to the outside. Mason is able to wear defenses down. Maybe you get Mason involved in the third, fourth quarter, wear the Buccaneers down, be able to churn out those long drives that just exhaust defenses out, that end up with points, and we're able to just put the game away early. That's another thing. I would love to have this game somewhat wrapped up, and I'm not trying to take the Buccaneers lightly or anything, but if we can have the game wrapped up where we can maybe rest some of our starters for the second half of the fourth quarter or the fourth quarter, that would be a huge benefit heading into the massive matchup next week, week 12, against the Seahawks. Now, when I look at the 49ers defense, there is a player on the Buccaneers who you just have to slow down. You're not going to stop him, and that's Mike Evans. Mike Evans is the leading receiver for the Buccaneers, and he is so good. Mr. Consistent, just you can chalk him in for over 1,000 yards in a season, probably 9-10 touchdowns. This year is no different. Him and Baker Mayfield having some really good plays together. They're just able to be productive, be able to make plays happen, and we have to slow them down. So how do you do that? It's not going to be easy, but my big question is going to be, who will the 49ers cornerbacks be? Last week against Jacksonville, we saw Ambry Thomas and Mooney Ward on the outside with Lenore kicking inside. Could we go that route again? Maybe, maybe not. And the reason why I say maybe not is because Chris Godwin, another very good receiver for the Buccaneers, he likes to line up in the slot. A matchup like him, he's a big physical receiver. Maybe that favors a matchup against Isaiah Oliver a little bit more, but I think we're going to have to pay so much attention to Mike Evans. Something that the Buccaneers do, and Mike Evans his entire career has done, is just be successful throwing the football down the field. So Talanoa Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson, they're going to have to be really aware when it comes to being the safeties, of being able to maybe have that double coverage on Mike Evans. You just can't make it easy for him at all. Make it so that the Buccaneers have to try and run to beat us, or anyone but Mike Evans. He's going to get his catches, no doubt, but if we can slow him down, that would be awesome. And speaking about their running game is not been good all year long. You look at their leading rusher, Rachaad White, he averages less than 50 yards rushing a game, 3.3 yards per carry, which is just not good at all in today's NFL. Ideally, you got to be hitting at least 4.5 yards per carry. So that's not a good sign for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If the 49ers can shut down that run game, then you put Baker Mayfield into some really difficult, tricky situations, and that allows our pass rush to basically just feast. The Buccaneers' left side of their offensive line really solid. The right side is still a work in progress. A lot of youth on the right side of their offensive line. So if the Buccaneers are in a lot of 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, you're going to see Bosa, you're going to see Chase Young lined up over the right side of the Buccaneer offensive line, and they are just going to try and do what they can against Baker Mayfield. Let's not forget, going back to 2019, that Monday Night Football game, Cleveland and 49ers, when Baker Mayfield was in Cleveland, how much Nick Bosa just wanted to sack and get after Baker Mayfield. This Sunday will be no different. Then you also have Chase Young, another Ohio State Buckeye. These guys are going to be anxious to get after Baker Mayfield, and I think they will a couple of times. But then what you want to do is you want to force the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just into mistakes, similar to what we did against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Force those turnovers. The Buccaneers actually have the same turnover ratio as the San Francisco 49ers this year. If we can win the turnover battle, that should go a long way to getting a 49er win on Sunday. Let's now talk about some of the key players in this matchup. And first off, we'll talk about 3 players for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who I think are key guys that we need to keep an eye on or who could really sway the outcome of this game. The first guy is going to be a relative unknown, and that's going to be right tackle Luke Goedeke. Second-year player, he was a second-round draft pick out of Central Michigan, and he's starting at right tackle. At right guard, you have Cody Mock, the rookie right guard out of North Dakota State. So it's a very inexperienced left or right side of the offensive line. And I think the 49ers are going to do what they can to try and exploit that. I think, of course, you're going to have Nick Bosa there. Maybe you're going to have Chase Young. You're going to throw a lot of different looks at that right side of the offensive line. There's going to be blitzes. There's going to be stunts. But I think if we can get after Baker Mayfield, force him to be a bit uncomfortable, we know that he has in the past been able, and he has thrown a lot of interceptions in the past. This year, he's been a lot better in that regard. Baker Mayfield's stats are quite a bit better, but a big thing here is if we can get pressure from that right side of the offensive line, that could go a long way to the 49ers winning this game. Luke Goedeke, from his perspective, he just has a crazy matchup this week to go after and go up against Nick Bosa and Chase Young, Randy Gregory all game long is not going to be easy. He's going to be challenged. The other thing too is Luke Goedeke, of course you don't want to give up the pressures, but the other thing too is you don't want to get flagged and basically stall out the offensive drives if you're the Buccaneers. Holding penalties, false starts, those can be a drive killer. So he's going to have to step up and have a big time game if the Buccaneers want to be able to move the ball effectively on the offense. Now, the other key player that I want to talk about on the offensive side for the Buccaneers is going to be wide receiver Chris Godwin. Mike Evans gets a lot of the accolades, and rightfully so, because he is just fantastic. But Chris Godwin actually has one more reception on the year compared to Mike Evans and has just as many first downs, meaning Chris Godwin lines up in the slot a lot. He's the guy who's going to move the chains. 3rd and 7, the ball's going to Chris Godwin. In the red zone, they tend to go more towards Mike Evans and Cade Otton so far this year, but Chris Godwin is going to be the drive extender, and that's going to be such a big thing because if we think back to the Vikings game and the Bengals game, the 49ers struggled to get off the field on 3rd down. They're going to target Mike Evans a lot, but for Chris Godwin, when it comes to those key downs, he is going to be the guy that we have to slow down. He's a really physical guy. Maybe we put Isaiah Oliver, because Chris Godwin is not the fastest guy, and Isaiah Oliver does match up pretty well against Godwin, so that could be interesting to see just how Steve Wilks and the defense go up and match up against these Buccaneer wide receivers. But Chris Godwin, he's going to be the guy. Watch out for him, especially on 3rd downs for the Buccaneers offense. Now moving on to the Buccaneers defense, I think, I've already talked about Vita Vea earlier, but I think Lavonte David, he's a guy that we have to keep an eye on. Their middle linebacker. He's their leading tackler so far on the year, and he has a big challenge up against him on Sunday. He's going to be tasked with trying to slow down guys like George Kittle, Juszczyk, and McCaffrey in the passing game, but also in the run game. They're going to be needing to step up and have a big game. Tampa Bay runs a 3-4 defense, which typically means that your linebackers are going to have to be the guys who have to make those tackles in the run game. McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason, whoever's getting the bulk of the carries, Lavonte David is going to have to be able to wrap up. Can't allow the 49ers run game to get established, because if we can establish our running game offensively, that's going to be essentially lights out for the Buccaneers, because then we can hit them with play action. We can do all the different things that Shanahan loves to do. So Lavonte David, not an easy task, but he's going to have one of his best games, if not his best game of the year, if the Buccaneers want to be able to slow down this 49ers offense. Now, when we move to the 49ers side of the field, the first key player that I want to talk about is going to be Dre Greenlaw, the linebacker. Last week, I said that Nick Bosa and Hufanga need to step up and have big games, and they did. This week, I'm going to say Dre Greenlaw, he needs to step up and just have a Dre Greenlaw type game. Flying all over the field, making plays, tackles for losses, interceptions. If we remember, he had that great interception last year against the Buccaneers where he tipped the ball up, was able to come down with it. But I want to see Dre Greenlaw basically just set the tone on defense, fly around, make some big plays, make some game-changing plays, because we're going to need them if we want to come away with a comfortable win against the Buccaneers. The other key player on the defense for the 49ers, He's only going to be in his second game with the Niners, but I'm going to say Chase Young. After Nick Bosa had his big breakout game last week against the Jaguars, the Buccaneers are going to pay extra attention to try and slow Bosa down. They're going to chip him. They're going to, send extra help against Nick Bosa. So I think Chase Young, he's the guy who's going to get a lot of one-on-one matchups. Can he show what he can do? He's going to be motivated to get after a guy like Baker Mayfield who went to Oklahoma. So I think if Chase Young can have a big game, maybe a sack or two, force a fumble, or even just force the Jaguars into holding penalties, things like that, that could be enough to really influence the game. But Chase Young, number 92, I'm going to be looking at you throughout the game while we are on defense. Now moving to the offensive side of the ball, and I've already talked about him quite a bit in this video, but the key player to me should be Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is just one of the ultimate weapons in the NFL. Last year, he was injured, he was out of shape. That's, done and dusted. This year, I want to see us get back to being that physical yak team, dominating after we get the ball in our hands. Deebo Samuel is a guy who can absolutely do that. I'd love to just see a vintage 2021 type game for Deebo Samuel, and I think this could be the game for that. You want to wear down the Buccaneers. They have a good defense. We want to keep the ball on 3rd and 6, get the ball to Deebo, run through guys, get those first downs, control the clock. And Deebo, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think he ends up with a couple of touchdowns, maybe 150, 160 all-purpose yards. And then when it comes to the Seattle game, that just gives them another thing to have to plan for on a short week against this 49ers offense. But those are the key players that I'm going to be looking at in this matchup. Now, guys, I want to give you my prediction for this game. And I'm going to have the prediction being 49ers 27, Buccaneers 17. I think it's going to be pretty close for a while. I think the Buccaneers might be able to hang. Baker Mayfield not afraid to air it out. Maybe they get a deep touchdown pass to Mike Evans despite our best efforts, but I think the 49ers eventually pull away in this game. Ideally, it would be maybe 27-10 with maybe like 5 minutes to go. We're able to pull some of the starters. They maybe get a garbage time touchdown, but as confident as I'm sounding in this video, we absolutely cannot overlook the Buccaneers. They have really good players. If you just look at this Buccaneers team on paper, they are stacked with a lot of amazing talent. So the 49ers have to come to play. We can't be complacent. Some people might look back to the game last year, 35-7, and just assume we're going to win. You cannot do that in the NFL. You see all the crazy scores that we're seeing week in and week out in the NFL. We have to come prepared to take on the Buccaneers and get the win, move to 7-3. Then we head into a 3-game stretch, which is potentially going to define our season. Seattle, Philadelphia, Seattle, that's going to be wild. I can't wait for the games. But there you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on the preview for the Buccaneers 49ers. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Who are some key players? What are some of the key matchups that you're going to be looking for? This should be a good game. I, of course, will be streaming this game live, so I hope all of you will join me for that because we always have a great time here at Shifty's 49ers Talk. If you enjoy the content, like the video, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really, really helps out the channel. And I'm going to head out, guys, but before I go, I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.